Somebody is going to buy a house this weekend. They're going to sign papers, shake hands, pop a bottle of champagne, and call their parents. And 10 years from now, they are going to quietly realize they would have been worth more money if they had never bought that house at all. Now, before you close this video and call me crazy, I need you to hear me out. Because what I'm about to show you is not an opinion, it's arithmetic, and the arithmetic is ruthless. You have been told your entire life that renting is throwing money away. You've heard it from your parents, your uncles, your coworkers, maybe even your own financial advisor. Stop paying someone else's mortgage, build equity, own something. And here's the thing, that advice feels so right, it sounds like wisdom. It sounds responsible. But when you sit down and actually run the numbers, the full numbers, not the ones the mortgage broker puts on that glossy little flyer, what you find will make your stomach drop. Because the people who told you renting is throwing money away never told you the other side of that sentence. And today we're going to finish that sentence together. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now. My name is David Marshall, and on this channel we take everything you were taught about money and we hold it up to the light to see if it actually holds up. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it completely falls apart. Today is one of those days where it falls apart. Let's go. Let me introduce you to two people. Both of them are 30 years old. Both of them have saved up $70,000. Both of them earn the same income. They live in the same city, and they are looking at the exact same $350,000 house in the same neighborhood. The first person, let's call him Marcus, decides to buy. He puts his $70,000 down and gets a mortgage. The second person, let's call her Priya, decides to keep renting a comparable place for $1,800 a month and invest every dollar of the difference between what Marcus spends and what she spends. These two people are going to live their financial lives in parallel. Same income, same city, same starting money, different decisions. And at the end of 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years, we're going to check in on both of them. We're going to follow the money like a documentary crew. No favoritism, no agenda. Just the math. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because almost every comparison you've ever seen between buying and renting is built on incomplete math. It shows you the equity Marcus builds, but it conveniently forgets a few things, and those forgotten things have a name. They are called unrecoverable costs, and they are absolutely brutal in the early years. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Marcus just got to the closing table. He's excited. He's signing everything. And then the stack of papers starts, page after page after page, and at the very bottom, after all the signing, there's a number that nobody really warned him about. Closing costs. We're talking loan origination fees, title insurance, appraisal fees, attorney fees, transfer taxes, prepaid interest. All of it stacked together. On a $350,000 home, Marcus just handed over somewhere between $7,000 and $17,000 before he even touches a light switch in that house. That money is gone. It does not build equity. It does not come back. It just disappears into the transaction. This is what we call transaction drag, and it starts the moment you show up at the closing table. Marcus is already in a hole before he unpacks a single box. But okay, he owns a home now. Month one begins. His mortgage payment is roughly $1,610 per month on a 30-year fixed rate. Now, most people hear that number and think, that's not bad. But here is what most people never actually look at, which is the breakdown of where that money goes in month one. Of that $1,610, approximately $1,225 goes to the bank as pure interest. That is the bank's fee for lending Marcus the money. It builds him exactly zero equity. Then about $385 goes toward the actual principal, which is the only part that actually belongs to Marcus. So in month one, Marcus just threw away $1,225 in interest. But that's not all. We also have to add property taxes. On a $350,000 home, the average effective property tax rate across the U.S. is roughly 1.1%. That's about $320 per month going to the county. Gone, no equity, just gone. And homeowners insurance, add another $150 per month. So in month one, before Marcus has fixed a single thing, before a single pipe leaks, the total unrecoverable costs he is paying are roughly $1,225 in interest plus $320 in property taxes plus $150 in insurance. That is $1,695 per month that Marcus is, by every economic definition of the phrase, throwing money away. Meanwhile, Priya is paying $1,800 in rent. People look at that number and cringe. But do you see what just happened? Marcus is throwing away $1,695 per month in unrecoverable costs, and Priya is paying $1,800 in rent. The gap is only $105. Not exactly the throwing money away disaster you were sold, is it? And we haven't even gotten to the part that makes most homeowners visibly uncomfortable when I bring it up. The 1% rule. Every serious real estate investor knows this, but somehow it never makes it into the conversation when someone's brother-in-law is telling them to buy a house. The 1% rule says that every year you should budget approximately 1% of your home's value for maintenance. On a $350,000 house, that is $3,500 per year, about $290 per month. Now, some years you spend nothing. And then one Saturday morning you wake up and there's water pooling in your basement and you spend $8,000 in a single weekend. The 1% rule exists because houses do not maintain themselves. Roofs age, HVAC systems die, water heaters fail exactly when you cannot afford them. Wall cracks appear that turn out to be foundation issues. Marcus needs to budget $290 per month just for the statistical certainty that something will break. Priya calls her landlord. So now Marcus's true monthly cost of homeownership looks like this. Principal that builds equity, about $385, but unrecoverable costs including interest, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance average out to roughly $1,985 per month, every month. Priya's unrecoverable cost is $1,800 in rent. Marcus's unrecoverable cost in year one is nearly $2,000. I need you to really sit with that, because this is the part of the math that gets hidden every single time. But we still haven't talked about the biggest number of all, and when I show it to you, it's going to reframe this entire conversation. Remember that $70,000 down payment Marcus made. That money is now locked inside the walls of his house. It is not in a brokerage account. It is not invested. It is sitting in the form of equity in a single property on a single street in a single neighborhood. This is what finance calls opportunity cost, and it is the most invisible expense in the entire homeownership equation. What happens to $70,000 if it stays invested in a total stock market index fund like VTI or VOO over 10 years? Assuming the historical average annual return of roughly 10%. After 10 years, that $70,000 becomes approximately $181,000. The money Marcus used as a down payment, if it had stayed invested, would have grown by $111,000 in the first decade alone. That is money Marcus gave up without ever spending it. And that $111,000 is not reflected anywhere on his mortgage statement. It doesn't show up in his equity. It just silently does not exist in his net worth because he chose to lock that capital inside one asset. Now this is where Priya's strategy gets interesting. Because Priya didn't make a down payment, she still has her $70,000 she invested on day one. And every month she invests the difference between what Marcus is spending and what she is spending. In the early years that difference is relatively small, but it compounds. And compounding is the closest thing to a financial superpower that exists in the real world. Here's the critical question though, and I need you to answer it honestly, not to me but to yourself. Are you honestly going to invest the difference? Because Priya's strategy only works with perfect consistency. If she spends the gap on lifestyle inflation, on a newer car, on vacations, on subscriptions, on the slow invisible creep of spending more because she doesn't feel the pressure of a mortgage, then her entire strategy collapses. The renting advantage evaporates completely, and Marcus wins by default. This is what behavioral finance calls forced discipline. The mortgage is brutal, but it forces Marcus to save by making it impossible not to. Priya has to create that discipline herself, and most people statistically do not. This is the moment where the math gets real and the psychology gets hard. Let's talk about the break-even point, because buying is not always wrong, selling is not always right. The question is always, how long are you staying? Every real estate purchase carries transaction drag on both ends. We already talked about the 2 to 5% closing costs going in. But when Marcus eventually sells, he's going to pay a seller's commission to real estate agents of roughly 5 to 6% of the sale price. On a home worth $400,000 by the time he sells, that commission alone could be $20,000 to $24,000, gone off the top, before he sees a single dollar. This means Marcus needs his home to appreciate enough to not only cover what he spent on it, But to overcome the transaction drag on both ends and beat what Priya's invested portfolio has been doing this whole time. The break-even point, the exact year where owning finally pulls ahead of renting and investing, the difference, varies dramatically based on the city, the price-to-rent ratio, the interest rate, and the local real estate market. In some cities, it's 7 years. In others, it's 12 years. In the most expensive markets, it stretches to 15 years or beyond. Here is what that means practically. If Marcus moves in year 4 because of a new job, a relationship change, a shift in what he needs, he almost certainly loses. The transaction drag alone swallows any equity he's built. He doesn't even come close to breaking even. And this brings us to something nobody frames as a financial asset but absolutely is: mobility premium. Priya can take a better job in Austin. She can move to a lower cost of living city. She can leave a neighborhood that changes. She can downsize when her kids leave. She can upsize when her income jumps. She is financially liquid in a way that Marcus is not. Marcus's net worth is mostly concentrated in one house on one street. That is what portfolio managers call concentration risk. If your whole neighborhood declines because a major employer leaves, or a highway gets rerouted, or school ratings drop, Marcus's entire financial foundation takes the hit. Priya's diversified portfolio of VTI and VOO does not care what happens to one street in one city. Liquid net worth versus home equity. This distinction matters more than most people realize, and it matters most in the moments when life changes fast. All right, now let's skip forward, because buying is not always the loser in this story, and I told you we'd follow the math wherever it goes. Year 10, Marcus's mortgage payment is the same as it was on day 1, fixed. Locked, $1,610 per month. Meanwhile, Priya's rent has been rising. If rent increases an average of 3% per year, after 10 years Priya is paying around $2,420 per month. That gap is starting to shift. Marcus's housing cost is now lower than Priya's rent by a meaningful margin. The assessed value of his home has likely appreciated. His equity has grown not just from principal paydown but from price appreciation. And every month, a slightly larger portion of that $1,610 is going to principal instead of interest, because that's how amortization works. The tide is slowly turning. Year 20, Priya is now paying roughly $3,200 per month in rent. Marcus is still at $1,610. Priya's portfolio has been growing, but so has the gap between what she's paying and what Marcus is paying. Marcus's home is probably worth around $600,000 to $700,000 by now, depending on the market. His remaining mortgage balance is shrinking. His equity is building serious mass. And here's where the psychology shifts again, because Marcus has been building something for 20 years. It's imperfect. There were expensive weekends. There was a roof replacement. There was the water heater that died on Christmas Eve. But there is also a significant asset that exists. Priya's portfolio, if she invested with perfect consistency, it's worth somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000 depending on returns, which is genuinely impressive. But her rent is $3,200 a month and rising, and the discipline required to maintain perfect investing consistency for 20 years while your rent climbs and your friends are throwing housewarming parties, that takes a level of behavioral firepower that most people cannot sustain. This is where we have to be honest about human beings. Not theoretical humans who do everything right. Actual humans who get divorced, lose jobs, have kids, buy things they don't need, and take vacations they put on credit cards. Year 30, the mortgage is paid off. Marcus wakes up one morning and has a $0 housing payment. He still owes property taxes. He still pays insurance. He still has to maintain the house. But those costs together might total $700 to $900 per month. His housing floor has dropped dramatically. He now has an asset worth potentially $800,000 to $1 million or more depending on where he bought and what the market did, and he has a floor under his monthly expenses that will never rise above that base. He can live on Social Security and a modest retirement account if he had to, because the mortgage is gone. This is the quiet power of ownership at 30 years. The floor. When you're 60 years old, the floor matters more than almost anything else. Priya, at 30 years, is still paying rent. If her rent has grown at 3% annually since she started, she is now paying somewhere around $4,200 per month. She will be paying rent in retirement, every month, forever. But if Priya was truly disciplined, if she invested the down payment on day 1 and invested every dollar of the gap between her costs and Marcus's costs for 30 years, Her portfolio could be worth $900,000 to $1,300,000. That is genuinely significant. That portfolio throws off dividends. It can cover her rent. It gives her choices that home equity cannot, because home equity is illiquid until you either sell or borrow against it. The renter wins on liquidity. The renter wins on flexibility. The renter wins in the early years. The renter wins in expensive cities with a high price-to-rent ratio. The homeowner wins on the floor. The homeowner wins when they stay for 15 or more years. The homeowner wins through forced discipline. The homeowner wins in cities where prices are reasonable relative to rent. Neither of them is throwing money away. They're both making trade-offs. And the only people who are actually genuinely throwing money away are the ones who rent and spend the difference, or the ones who buy in a city they'll leave in 3 years. Now I want to come back to the phrase that started this whole video: renting is throwing money away. Here's what's actually true. In year 1, Marcus throws away roughly $1,985 per month in unrecoverable costs. Priya throws away $1,800. So in the first year, technically, Marcus throws away more money than Priya does. Let that land. The person who was told they were being smart by buying is losing more to unrecoverable costs in year 1 than the person who was told they were being foolish by renting. This isn't an argument against buying. This is an argument against oversimplified advice, because the math is not what you were taught, and the question is never is renting or buying better. The question is always which is better for me in my city, at my income, with my timeline, and with my honest behavioral track record. Do you have the discipline to invest the difference every single month for 30 years? If the answer is yes, renting in an expensive city with a high price-to-rent ratio might genuinely be the smarter financial move. Do you want a floor under your retirement expenses? Do you want an asset that forces you to save? Do you plan to stay in one place for 15 or more years? Buying might be the smarter move. There is no universal answer, but there is a universal dishonesty in how this conversation gets framed. And today we tried to fix that. Here's what I want you to actually do with this. First, look up the price-to-rent ratio in your city. If the median home price is more than 20 times the annual rent for a comparable property, that market favors renting and investing the difference. If it's under 15 times, buying begins to make more mathematical sense. Second, be brutally honest with yourself about discipline. Not aspirational you, the you who is sitting on your couch right now. Have you consistently invested the past year? Have you followed through on financial commitments before? Because the rent and invest strategy is a math problem that requires behavioral perfection to execute, and behavioral perfection is genuinely rare. Third, calculate your real break-even point. Not just when does equity build, but when does the total cost of owning, including transaction drag on both ends, the opportunity cost of your down payment, the unrecoverable costs of interest, taxes, insurance, and maintenance, actually fall below the total cost of renting and investing. Most people have never run this number. Run it. And fourth, stop letting the phrase "throwing money away" make decisions for you. It is an emotional trigger, not a financial analysis. And the people who say it usually haven't done the full math. I want to leave you with something that I think about when it comes to every major money decision. And this is what we call the oxygen philosophy on this channel. Money decisions are like oxygen on an airplane. You have to secure your own financial understanding before you can help anyone else, before you can take advice from anyone else, before you can feel confident about any major choice. The moment you outsource your financial thinking to a phrase, to a tradition, to what your parents did, or to what your coworkers are doing, you stop breathing your own oxygen. You start breathing someone else's. Marcus and Priya are not opposites. They're not enemies. They made different bets with different trade-offs. Both of them could come out ahead or behind depending on one thing: whether they understood what they were signing up for before they signed. That's the whole game, not buying versus renting, understanding versus assumption. If this video gave you even one number you hadn't seen before, one framework that reframes how you think about this, share it with someone who needs to hear it before they show up at a closing table with a stack of papers and a blindfold on. And if you want to go deeper on the math, if you want to see how this plays out in different cities, different interest rate environments, and different income levels, subscribe to this channel right now, because we are just getting started. There is a lot more math coming, and all of it is going to be this uncomfortable. See you in the next one.